everyone, and a very warm welcome. The topic for today's discussion is from EQ to IQ, I being investment. India has forever been a land of mysteries. We have seen big institutions like banks, insurance entities, and asset management firms being run by women. We have also had global giants like PepsiCo being run by an Indian lady managing key strategic and capital decisions. Even in the field of entrepreneurs, we have had biocons of the world and profitable startups like Nika. 25% chartered accountants in India are women, and there is increased participation in business schools by women. While studies have shown that women portfolios tend to do better than their male counterparts, but the participation of women in capital markets is abysmally low. The time to discuss this could not have been better because the topmost finance position in India is being managed by a lady herself for the first time ever in Indian history. To discuss this dichotomy, we have with us Ms. Radhika Gupta. She is the Managing Director and CEO at Edelweiss Asset Management. She has many accolades to her name. She's a Wharton School alumnus, a TEDx speaker, and an active microblogger. She has also been recognized by Business Today as the 30 most powerful women in Indian businesses. Many thanks, Radhika, for joining in, and I hope you, your family, and everyone at Edelweiss are doing well.
Thank you, Megha and the team, and thank you for having me talk on this very interesting topic.
Radhika, let me begin by asking you, we spoke about extreme polarization and dichotomy. What do you think is a primary reason that drives this disparity, and what can be done to overcome this?
So I think a few things happen. I think, and I've done lots of IAPs and seminars and sessions where I'm talking to women investors. And, someone also once asked me why more personally, there were not more women in asset management or in capital markets industries in India and also overseas, because I've spent a lot of my career overseas also. And I think it comes down to a very fundamental bias that exists that, finance, stock trading, it all came from the kind of broker dealer, Wall Street kind of thing. And, when you see movies like Wolf of Wall Street and you hear the whole sort of Dalal Street thing, there is a very unfortunately alpha male vibe associated with this. And it carries over to the fact that you think that in order to work in capital markets or in order to manage your money, you need to constantly be talking stocks, you need to know a lot of technical jargon. So the profession, both the profession and the process of investing appear very complicated. It feels like, this is definitely not for me. It's very easy to say this is not for me because it looks complicated and it's difficult and it's technical. And, to be a good investor, I need to have read great books about Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger and this and that, which is actually all not true. And we can talk about it later in the session. I mean, being a great investor doesn't mean you read a pile of books this big and you're constantly on a screen, etc. Nor does it mean that if you want to have, I tell girls this too, if you want to have a great career in capital markets, doesn't mean you're like always reading capital markets. However, I think with your and maybe my generation of girls, this is also changing a little bit. I think people are getting more aspirational. I think women are getting more aspirational. My mother's generation started earning their own incomes, but probably left money management to their husbands and spouses, to their husbands or fathers, etc. But I think our generation is getting a lot more aspirational. There are also a lot more resources and things like this that are happening that are pushing you to say, listen, you can do this. It's not difficult. But I think the fundamental dichotomy comes from sort of the pop culture and sort of the myths that, Wolf of Wall Street, as I would say.
Right, Radhika. And, that brings me to my next question, which is, you are kind of at the top position in an asset management company and rightly the only women there, I would say. So, how do you take your financial decisions? Are you an independent individualist as far as your individual portfolio is concerned? Because, we do see women getting involved, but it is more of a secondary, tertiary role that they play and not a very active role as far as decision making is concerned. So I would like to understand from you as to how do you personally manage your finances?
Sure, and I think that's a great question. So, one, I don't do anything that's very complicated. Now, I think, since you use the word personal finance, I would say in the word personal finance, personal comes before finance. And I take the personal very seriously. And I would advise anyone that, your personal finances are your own. So, my and your situation, Megha, will be very different. And my situation is very different from my mother's or my brother's or my friends or whatever. And your financial decisions have to be a function of that. Now, I'm married, but I don't have kids. Both myself and my husband work in very high risk industries, which are capital markets. One of the big learnings that we had in 2008 was, and at that point, we were very young and we started earning. So we did very risky investments. I mean, we were largely equity oriented in nature. We realized in 2008 that that actually doesn't work for us because we are married to each other who are both high risk professionals, and we are working in an industry that's high risk. So in a year like 2008 or 2020, our incomes fall because bonuses are lower, our companies are under stress. I mean, all this stuff happens. So our own investments are very conservative. Now, both of us manage our own money, but we manage it together. It is very important, I think, if you have a spouse or partner in this, for you to take equal decisions on this. And I think your decision making has to be a reflection of the family. If my husband was a doctor or in a very different profession, perhaps my own finances would be very different. They would not be as conservative as they are. So that's one of the things we do. We also agree on broad principles that matter to us. Like, we don't do funds where our money is locked up. We tend to do things that are similar. So we try to do that. Third, we try to keep things very simple between us. So less number of funds, clear focus on asset allocation, and we don't get too excited and too depressed. We tend to review our portfolio once a quarter, and we actually sit down and do it together. So my husband started this culture. We put it in a spreadsheet and we sit down and we review that every quarter. And again, that's a great exercise that I recommend every husband and wife also sit and do. If the wife is not involved in management, by the way, it's a great way for you to start getting involved and learning about that. So that's what we do. In terms of what we invest in, we largely invest in mutual funds. I have 70% of my money. I mean, I am a big proponent of asset allocation. So 70% of my money goes into a single fund, which is an asset allocation and balanced advantage fund. It reflects my conservative risk profile. I get some equity benefit, some debt benefit, and the other stuff goes into equity funds, international equity funds, etc. Big believer of SIPs. As a way of saving, not just about the return, and have never stopped an SIP. And big believer of not spending too much time. So I don't obsess over my personal finances. I think that's one of the big myths that you're a capital markets professional, you're always looking at your portfolio. I actually don't. If you asked me in March what happened to my portfolio, I had no idea. I look at it once a quarter, and that makes me comfortable. And the last thing I would say is that one of the things I've learned is to take the risk that is right for me. And that makes you very comfortable in a downturn. So through this year of 2020, despite everything that's happened in markets, even in a month like March, where things were much worse than they are now, I never felt stress about lifestyle and this and that and markets and ESOP and all that. I felt that in 2008 because I financially planned much worse then. So that has been the evolution also as an investor.
Right, Radhika. I think you made a very important point that in personal finance, personal is more important than finance. And it's a very, I would say, important point that every investor needs to take into consideration. Now, as advisors, the ground reality, Radhika, is that though women understand and acknowledge the fact that they need to be a part of financial decision making, they do involve themselves when we do our reviews or meet our investors. But the problem is that it rarely translates into action. You briefly touched upon the fact that it is not important to understand the nitty gritties, as is required or is perceived. But the common objections that we get are, we have lack of interest, numbers intimidate us, so on and so forth. So, what is your practical advice to women investors in general in this regard?
So first, I want to tell you that as women investors, numbers don't intimidate you and you are not bad at money. For all of us, our mothers and grandmothers, I mean, so I come from UP, and when our mothers and grandmothers were not working, or even if they were, they used to get, remember, they used to get this budget to manage the house. And miraculously, they used to manage the house very nicely with that. And then they used to have some money that they kept aside. In our Guptas, we call it Guptdhan, that the husband never even knew about. And it was able to manage a rainy day. This is women, right? We are able to manage within a budget, do the very best for the family, and still get savings right. So clearly, generationally, and you learned this during demonetization, the quantum of Indian women's savings was also pretty public during demonetization. So I think the Indian woman has it in her to manage money probably better than a man does. So get it out of your head that you don't have this skill set, because you clearly do. Now, the second thing I would recommend is don't start by reading investment books. There was a great case study I was reading today morning I mean, everybody talks about Warren Buffett, but there's a great case study of this lady called Anne Schieber. I don't know, you may have read it from the Smart Investor, but essentially she's a woman who turned $4,000 into $20 million just by doing things that all of us would do. She invested in things she knew. She didn't get disheartened by failures, and she smartly managed tax with all the legal provisions, etc., that the government and the breaks that they give you. I mean, this is stuff that we all understand. So women can definitely do this. I would encourage you to do a few things. One is get up to speed on the investment basics. And there are so many resources these days. And of course, advisors like you will guide them on that. What is equity? What is debt? What is a basic asset allocation? What is gold? I think these three basic things, if you can understand the basic asset classes, understand that you can do direct equities, understand that you can do mutual funds. Second thing is understand your own risk appetite and family's risk appetite. I think women are very good at gauging this, by the way. One of the things I like to see when I plan money is, okay, what's the worst that can go wrong? If I invested in 50 equity and 50 debt, in a year, like in the worst years, what can happen? And if I'm comfortable with the worst year, I know it's the right kind of asset allocation. So understand your risk appetite, and then start having conversations and start doing some investing. You could start with as little as 5,000 rupees on which you make your own decisions, but it's important to start. So those are the few things that I would definitely, and I think advisors like you are definitely taking that effort to pull them into the conversation. In case, one thing that I suggested, even if you're not involved in the money management, just tell your spouse that, listen, once a quarter, can we sit down and discuss our finances? I mean, it's something that you should do responsibly, because life is uncertain and both partners should know the financial situation. It's a great way to start getting involved.
You mentioned the role of advisors. And, I was completely consent with you where you said that, we can break stereotypes. Now, in our experience, when we dealt with, women investors, they have often been prone to emotional misselling, unfortunately, which has kind of broken their trust forever in financial assets. What are the qualities, you would suggest as a veteran investor and from the same industry as major checkpoints before our investor decides which advisors to work with? Because I think it's a very, very critical role that advisors play.
Absolutely. In fact, our brand campaign at Edelweiss has been Advice Zaruri Hai, so I couldn't emphasize this more. And I think the process of choosing an advisor is a marriage that you need to spend a lot of time on. I mean, the first thing I would say is don't choose the first advisor that you find. Take time to do this. I think it is a relationship of trust. The bedrock of this relationship is trust. And you have to find somebody that you can trust and that you have chemistry with. The relationship with the advisor is not going to work if you don't share things with the advisor. The advisor is kind of like a financial partner through life. So you have to trust the advisor. If this is not someone you can sit in front of and reveal your financial situation, your goals, your dreams, your success, your struggle, then no matter how talented the person is, something is wrong there. So I think trust and comfort is the most important part. Otherwise, the relationship, the marriage will not work. Second thing is, I think you need to, when you talk to the advisor, think about how the advisor, and women are generally good judges of this. The advisor's first questions should not be, or first things should not be, oh, here's a great new product, ma'am, you should do this. It should be, what are your goals? They should be asking questions. They should be understanding you. Ultimately, personal finance is personal. So advice is very customized. Is the person interested in you? Are they willing to spend time? Or are they pushing you to make a decision and talking about products, etc.? I think this is a second great gauge. The third one is that I think, as in any professional, is the advisor knowledgeable, working hard to build up their own knowledge? I think you get that sense when you speak. Are they telling you things that you want to hear? Like, if you're saying, I'll give you an example that, international funds have done really well. I want to buy a US fund, and the advisor is like, yeah, you should do this. Or are they cautioning you? Are they asking you difficult questions? Are they pushing you? Any good coach or teacher, I mean, we know this from lifelong coaching, is not someone who will just say yes to everything. They'll push you, they'll make you uncomfortable, they'll ask you difficult questions. Is the advisor doing that? They may say, oh, this is not the right time to do so much equities, or you want to do equities because markets have done well, but it's not right for you. So they'll make you a little uncomfortable. They won't say yes to everything you want to do just to make a sale. I think these 2, 3 points, if you keep in mind, you'll find it easy to find a good advisor. And there are many of them out there.
I think, clear communication or transparent communication is very important because financial advisors are ultimately financial doctors at the end of the day. A common problem, while we talk to clients and even women investors typically is when we try to gauge their willingness to take risks, it often comes across that they're primarily risk averse. Now, I'm not really sure whether it stands true at the broader spectrum or it, kind of governs the majority of women investors. I would like to understand from you because I'm sure you would have access to data as to whether women typically invest only in fixed income or they have a substantial percentage holdings as far as equities are concerned. Do you think it is more of a referencing problem, or do you think they're generally lower in terms of their willingness to take risks?
I think they are lower in terms of an investment population, but I don't think you can say they don't do fixed income, they don't do equities. It's hard to generalize. It is also not bad to be risk aware. I would not say not risk taking. I mean, you have to take a risk. Ultimately, money is the business of taking sensible risks and earning returns. So I think you have to find that balance. That's very, very important. And so being risk aware is very important. I also think that for women, starting slowly is important. Now, sitting at 100% debt is definitely not right for anyone because you're not beating inflation, and your real money is not growing. Sitting at 100% equity is not right for everyone. It's really about finding a balance. But I think you need all kinds of women. I would say younger women tend to be very, very risk taking in nature, especially with generations as they get far more aspirational. I also would say to women that today, life is not just debt or equity. I mean, there is a myth even in mutual funds that it's all equity, बहुत risky hai, all this stuff. I think there are a wide range of asset allocation ideas that advisors will give. There are also a wide range of investment solutions, balanced funds, hybrid funds, etc., that combine equity of debt. So I think within a mutual fund, one of the reasons I like this industry is you can mix from a 1-day fund to a 10-year fund. And so there are products for all risk appetites available. So don't think that just because I'm conservative doesn't mean I should invest. And also, take gradual risks. I always say that, when you start swimming, you don't jump into the deep end of the pool. You go, as a kid, you wear your floaters, you jump into the baby pool, then you jump into the shallow end of the pool, you get some comfort, maybe you get hurt, you take off the tub and the floaters, and then you swim to the deeper end of the pool, and then maybe you learn to jump and dive. So that process also should be gradual.
You made a very interesting point that it is more like on the job training where you start with baby steps and gradually proceed towards more complicated investments are concerned. But I'm a firm believer that investment should be very, very simple to kind of know what you're really doing. Now, Radhika, a lot of our clients like real estate and gold as asset classes. One advantage of probably real estate and gold is that they don't see the values on an ongoing basis. However, when you expose them to equity investments, because of the transparency, our regulators have probably adopted. They see the values on a daily basis, and this kind of makes them uncomfortable with the inherent volatility which comes along. Now, I am sure it is more of a mindset issue wherein you don't need to really see it daily, but probably as first-time investors, you are very excited to do that. So, how would you advise to change this mindset and try to kind of solve this problem?
So this is pure mindset, as you said. I always say to my friends that if I send you an NAV of your house every day, then I gave star ratings for that house, then I published those NAVs on newspapers, then I circulated WhatsApp when the NAV fell by 10%, you would go mad being a homeowner. So the problem is, unfortunately, a house doesn't have an NAV and you live in a house, so you feel emotional about a house. I think real estate is not a financial investment, because what you also don't realize with the house is if you want to go liquidate it, unlike an equity fund, it will be damn hard to liquidate. And the liquidation cost and etc. of physical assets is very different. So please don't compare them. I think the best thing you can do is two things. One is you have to realize, so I'm a software engineer by training, is that volatility in equity is not a bug. It's not something that goes wrong in equity. It is a feature. This is the reality of life. It's a little bit like living in India. India is a growth country, but chaos is a part of living in the country. It's a feature of living in India versus a developed market where you grow a lot less, but life on the whole is a lot simpler. So volatility is that. And that's why I said looking at worst case outcomes. Now, if you know that the worst that can happen in equities is a loss of 50%, then you'll buy only enough equities so that you're comfortable with that. Second, I would say please check your portfolio less frequently. We get a mutual fund NAV once a day, but because we watch CNBC, because you have this phone, because someone will send you a newspaper, you feel that 2% in cut in markets about 10 times a day emotionally. It's actually very, very hard. And this is a very, very connected world that you live in. The better thing to do is try and set a frequency with your advisor for portfolio reviews. This is what I do. I have a frequency for portfolio reviews. I think once a quarter is more than adequate for anybody. And beyond that, live your normal life. So as I said, people asked me in March, how's your portfolio doing? And I said, I don't know, because it's not my time to review it. You can't spend all your time doing this. So set up a frequency at which you review it. Please do remember, when you're investing in equities, you're investing in underlying companies. Now, many of you run small businesses or are professionals. You do know that a company's reality and fortunes don't change every day. Actually, they don't change once in 3 months also. As a CEO, if I had to turn around a company, it would take years and years. So then why do you need to review your portfolio every day? You're an owner in the company. The company's owner doesn't review the prospects of the company every day, and you want to sit and review it every day. So I think less reviews and targeted reviews will really help.
Radhika, a big change is typically the result of hundreds of tiny steps that count. And while you as a product manufacturer would do your bit and we as advisors would do our bit, but do you think it is time for Indian regulators or policymakers to wake up and say that, you need a campaign, or, you need something very concentrated to, kind of re-emphasize the importance of women investors matter? Do you think it is high time we do that?
Actually, I think it's a very good idea. It's not something I've contemplated till you asked me the question, but I think given that there is so much sort of impetus from this government in terms of pushing women, skilling, pushing more women into the workforce. I mean, ultimately in India, you have only 25% labor force participation. I remember Honorable FM had said in a speech that, if a country aspires to be a superpower that it does, if India aspires to be a $5 trillion economy, and it thinks it can do so without its women, it's like flying a plane with one wing. And if you aspire to have a developed capital market where more and more investors are participating, well, 50% of your base is women. I also think that people underestimate the importance of having financially savvy women, because women don't only make decisions for themselves. If women are financially savvy, they make decisions for households often, for their children, for their parents. So actually in the US, there was a study saying that in consumption, women influence 70 to 80% of the decisions, even though they are 50% of the population. So if there is an additional regulatory impetus, to just make women more aware about why they need to do this, and more importantly, not why they need to do this, why they can do this. Then that's very, very important. Unfortunately, in this, and the reason I'm so passionate about this topic is you hear very sad stories. You hear stories of even working women who have worked for 20 years and then life happens and an unfortunate divorce or something happens, and because they didn't manage the money, even the money that they earned for 20 years just went away from them because they never bothered to look at it. So you work very hard for your house and your life. You have to make sure your money works hard. And I think the more social awareness about it, the better. And I always say that regulations third, investor advisors and AMCs first, but the more the better.
Right, Radhika. I think you've gotten some extremely interesting perspectives. My key takeaway is that, irrespective of the gender, a proper investment policy statement which kind of underlies your objectives and constraints is of paramount importance. And as long as you get that right, it doesn't matter which gender you are, but, that goes a long way in creating long-term wealth. Many thanks, Radhika, for joining in and having this conversation with us. I'm sure this is going to be of great use to our investors. Thank you.
Thanks, Megha.